CCG governing body. I'd just like to start with apologies for absence. Joe, have we got any apologies?
The only apologies I've received are from Ed, Garrett.
Okay, and Richard will be standing in for Ed as a consequence. Thank you, Richard. Going on to declarations of interest, any hospitality or gifts, we have got the routinely declared interests in our papers, but in terms of our agenda today, Fanwell, did you want to declare something?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to declare on item number 6, the patient story. We're going to be talking about a young ambassadors program, young health ambassadors program, which I'm involved in with my colleagues Tonya and Ingrid, who are going to be joining me for that part.
Okay, thank you. A good declaration to make. Great work. Look forward to hearing about it. Before we go on to the body of the agenda, I just wanted to take a little bit of time to say thank you to everyone working out in our health and care teams for all their hard work in what is trying circumstances. I know that there's a lot of sickness absence within those health teams, and they are having to work hard in order to manage the demand that's out there. And just a reminder to anyone listening in that COVID is still as rampant as it's ever been, with further surge following Omicron and its sibling. We're seeing significantly increased numbers who are requiring hospital support. So everyone out there, please remember your hygiene. We've seen benefits of hygiene for reducing the spread of COVID, but also reducing the spread of a lot of other infectious diseases that can hit us. So there's lots of benefits to continuing that. And a plea to everyone that in healthcare settings, please can you wear a mask, especially if you are asked to do so, and can you please be tolerant and kind about that request. You know, the mark of a civil society is how we treat our most vulnerable. So please remember that your civil liberties may be at a health cost to someone who is more vulnerable than you. So please be kind, be tolerant, and please follow instructions if you're given them. Thank you. I also wanted to talk about the two issues that I brought previously to governing bodies in November and in January, about two key challenges that I certainly see as a senior leader. One is the capacity in our workforce, and the second is the deprivation we are seeing increasingly driving both inequality of health outcome, but also driving demand in our health and care system. Before Christmas, made a plea saying if somebody was listening, putting some effort behind those two things from a political, from a senior leadership perspective would be great. But we know that pressure on public finances means that actually that needed increase in workforce capacity will not be funded with additional money, and the increase in pay will need to be balanced with allocations made into systems already. So we're going to see increasing pressure, both in terms of burnout of our workforce and the impact of abuse that we're seeing towards staff will make that challenge worse. And we really need to be giving really hard thinking about how we're going to meet that challenge of workforce capacity. We also know that cost of living crisis will undoubtedly drive worsening of deprivation impact and people choosing between heating or eating, or who will eat in their household. Rural households dependent on oil and bottled gas will most certainly be feeling that impact. And as a consequence, we should expect some really severe challenges to services supporting our population. So I'm really sorry to have to say those things, but that's how I see it as a senior leader, trying to help bring decent service, decent prevention to poor health outcomes in our communities. The last thing I wanted to do was bring attention to a Health Foundation report, which has been recently published into the activity of general practice over the last few years. And it provides many real facts on the workload that general practice has borne over that time, how people access it, what their preferences are in how they use GP services, and shows the satisfaction that patients using services have with their general practice. And I don't think there's a better way of looking at what general practice does for you than looking into this particular report. And I personally believe that it is a much more informed way of developing an opinion about how the future of GP services should be secured than populist opinion and policy announcements driven through certain newspapers that I won't mention. But I would say if you want to form your own opinion, look at the facts and then form your opinion first. So thank you for that. Can we go on to item 3, the minutes of the previous meeting on the 25th of January? Are people content with those minutes and happy that they represent a true reflection of our meeting then? Anyone unhappy with that? So we're all okay with that, in which case shall we move on to matters arising, which I think is complete. In which case, Richard, over to you for a general update.
Thank you, Chair. So just a couple of bits building on what you've already covered from me today. So starting with the NHS COVID vaccination programme, I'm sure all aware that when the national programme is now inviting eligible people to come forward, which is people aged over 75 and those that are immunosuppressed for a 4th booster jab. We remain nationally in a level 4 incident for COVID and locally remain vigilant. As you've said, Chair, we've seen a rise in the last 2 weeks in the number of acute hospital beds occupied with someone who is COVID positive, although for many of these it's not the main reason they've been admitted. However, this is creating significant capacity challenges for the system, and Paul will be updating further on in the agenda on emergency care pressures and some of the work we've got underway to try and mitigate those. We've also now submitted our draft 22-23 planning submission to NHS England. So this sets out the detail on our finances, our performance, our activity, and how we'll be delivering some of the main national priorities, which includes continuing to recover our elective and mental health activity. Jane will give a little bit of a taster to what we've started to put together on that, although it's still early days because the final submission's not due until the end of April. In terms of elective recovery, remain focused on bringing down to 0 those waiting over 2 years for elective treatment by June of this year. So that's in line with national expectations. We're making good progress on this, and again, Paul will no doubt be providing an update as part of the performance item later on in the agenda in terms of the progress we've made and particularly the detailed plans to try and get that down as soon as possible. And then I'm also pleased to say we're engaging with patients to comment on plans to develop cardinal medical practice, which will offer services to the patients currently at Norwich Road, Deben Road and Chesterfield Drive. And Maddie, I'm sure, will cover later on in the agenda a little bit more about that exciting development. So I'll leave it there, Mark. There's probably some of the main things, and I'm sure we'll pick up all of those points later on in the agenda.
Thank you. Just an opportunity if anyone wanted to raise any questions on those things. No, in which case, oh, Aisha.
Thank you, Mark. I just wanted to raise a question around vaccination, COVID vaccination, because I understand there is an issue around supply of the vaccine in the region to the PCN, and that this put risk patients who are based in care homes and housebound, and how is that going to be managed effectively so that they get vaccination as soon as possible?
Thank you. Anyone able to respond?
I'm not clear on the detail on that, but I'm happy to pick that up with Liz Maloney outside of the meeting and get back to the board if that's helpful. Unless I know, Lisa, you've also been on leave for the last week.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that, but equally would want to understand that a bit further.
Indeed, thank you. So Aisha will take it outside and report back on it. Thank you. In which case we can come to our patient story. Those of you who follow our meeting will know that we use a patient story to help ground us in the reality of what is happening outside of this governing body. And I'm delighted to ask Fanwell to introduce the item. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you everyone for inviting us. With my colleagues Tonya and Ingrid from Volunteering Matters, we're going to be presenting this section. Just sort of as a way of quick introduction, you will all remember that in this forum, for the longest time, we've been talking about the importance and the need for true co-production in everything that we do. Alongside that, we've also been talking, particularly with regards to young people, about the impact that COVID has had on young people, the lockdowns, and some of the the issues that we've discussed, really about the need to have very good interventions that can deliver true change for young people. A lot of the challenges come from the fact that we sit in forums like this and we decide what it is that works for young people, and more often than not, people come back to us and say, why is this not working? Particularly, why are young people from certain backgrounds less represented in certain projects, certain interventions? People will say, oh, we came up with this, amazing state-of-the-art project, but young people are not turning up. Why is that happening? So, we came together with our colleagues from Volunteering Matters, and we said, how do we really, sort of go to the bottom of this? And the reason why we have decided to do this with VM is the fact that over many years, they've been doing a lot of youth social action programs that are really attracting young people, especially those from less represented groups. And so we brought together, the ethos of true co-production and youth social action. And we have started on a piece of work where we really want to talk to young people, have the young people inform the work that we do. When we talk to the young people, they're constantly saying to us, nothing about us without us. So we've said, okay, we're coming to you. We want you to be the leaders. We want you to inform, this piece of work. We're going to return at some point in the future with the young people that are participating in this, and we're going to be talking to you. But we feel that it's important at this early stage to come and present to you so that we can start to identify how all of us can get involved, along the journey before we get to the end of it. So, at this stage, I'm going to hand over to Tonya and Ingrid to talk us through how the project is going until this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Fanwell. Hello, everyone. My name's Tonya Wilson. I'm a project manager at an organisation called Volunteering Matters. I think we have a PowerPoint for you. I think we sent over a PowerPoint for you. I don't know who has it, but it would be really helpful.
Ingrid.
Hey, perfect. Okay, so
just yes.
Wonderful. So I'll ask you just to go through it, Ingrid, when we kind of get to each bit. So as Fanwell said, we are an organisation. We are a national organisation. Volunteering Matters used to be CSV, so we're very kind of, we've been running since 1960, so we're really apt at kind of managing youth social action programmes and volunteering programmes across the UK. We've kind of had a new CEO, so now we're England, Scotland and Wales, and we've got some really exciting pieces of work. My role is to lead on something called trauma-informed youth social action, which uses the power of storytelling to encourage young people to use their agency and to mobilise change. And so this was a really exciting programme for us, because we had already done some really kind of groundbreaking work around a group of young women with English as an additional language, where they had looked at trauma, domestic abuse, and had kind of got some real kind of national recognition for some of their work. They also delivered and created training packages that were endorsed by our Suffolk Safeguarding Partnership. And so that was able to then kind of roll out professional training as well as workshops within schools. So our health ambassadors, when we kind of first came up with this concept, we were doing something called an Ideathon. And the Ideathon was on a kind of global platform. And we worked with a group of young people from who had English as a second language, and they were looking at the issue around health and well-being and saying that actually services, although there may be lots of them, they felt that their accessibility to these services was a challenge. And so they kind of came up with the idea of a kind of health ambassador program that we have now developed. We've piloted that obviously as a youth ambassador program in schools last year. And to start with, we had quite a slow uptake, but we've kind of tweaked it. And this year we now have 200 young people doing our ambassador course. So it's very exciting. So let's tell you a little bit about how we're getting that information. So when you use the power of stories, we can't obviously, because of safeguarding, have a young person say, well, this is my story, because, that's a really traumatic experience. So what we've done is we've created two characters. We actually have a third character who is non-binary, but we haven't placed them at the moment because young people are creating them. So we've created two personas. And characters. One is Astra and one is Patrick. And we use this when we kind of encourage young people to share an aspect of their story. And we kind of put it so that the characters are an amalgamation of young people in Suffolk. And so this is the kind of strategy we use. And we take those young people and we kind of share a shared story, a lived experience to kind of encourage other young people to kind of look at solutions instead of kind of problems. So we've created these personas. Thank you very much, Ingrid. The purpose of this programme is for young people to use their agency to kind of really advocate for change. So they do this by using activities which are narrated through these two individuals. And we have created a book. And this book is kind of, it runs over 12 weeks, and the schools kind of work with young people to create health ambassadors. What we hope is to create a network of health ambassadors to support their communities, but also elevate the voices of their communities across, so that can filter back into healthcare services, so that we don't have any young person feeling that they can't access any form of support due to language or due to all the kind of other kind of myths that they may kind of be encountering. So how does that run? Well, with our health ambassador programs, we have staff and volunteers that we train up. They will then Zoom almost into a classroom. There will be several classrooms that are working with their specific teacher. They all receive a book, and the book is something they work through each week with their class and with their teacher. We have 6 ambassador programs running from March to July, primary, secondary and further education. I'm currently doing one at the moment at a college with healthcare students. The programme will have kind of an additional 4 weeks after they've done the main bit around empathy, equity, what it means to be an advocate, understanding some of the, the challenges young people have coming forward. What will happen then is they create a youth social action program within their own school. So it has to be led by them, and it has to be created by them. So it could be looking at their bullying policy. It could be looking at self-harm, looking at accessibility. It could be whatever they want it to be, and we kind of help them shape that. In July, we will be hosting a Suffolk-wide youth conference, which will kind of showcase all of their experience and learning. And we're having that, fingers crossed, if I can manage to get it, at Suffolk at the university. And so it will be an opportunity for young people to kind of showcase their learning, talk about kind of change that needs to happen or how they see it happening, and work and be able to share that with professionals. Thank you, Ingrid. So the 16 plus works is kind of over 5 weeks. We'll be exploring the adultification of Black and minoritized young people within Suffolk Health and Social Care. We have 15 young people that are helping us do this. I don't need to say what's happened in the media has also sparked lots of interest around kind of maybe how services may need to explore some of these issues in a deeper way. We have an Irise Art Program, which is a youth-led consultation group. We have about 5 young people who are Black and minoritized, who come together, and they create kind of visual, kind of creative content using kind of lived experiences to support us to create toolkits and shape other programs. In April, we will have 24 students who will be starting our intensive 3-week ambassador program in blocks, and they will be looking at, last time we've done this, they looked at hidden disabilities. They also looked at health and well-being. So I'm quite interested to see what they come out with this time. We don't know yet because, again, young people have to be part of creating that. We have an Easter program which is working with 10 young people aged 11 to 15. And that course is about kind of creating something outside of a school environment. So some will be in school, some are kind of outside of school. And this group of young people have been quite, I suppose they've been activists for us around kind of bullying campaigns and staying safe online. And so this will just be about creating more health ambassadors that can elevate the voices of their peers. And then we have 6 young people who are autistic or on the autistic spectrum who will be creating and narrating an immersive audio and art installation to kind of lead on from Autistic Awareness Week. And they want to create something that invites us in to walk through the world in, or a moment in time as someone who may have a neural divergence. And so they've created this amazing art installation, but then to also start to ask the question around how there are limited numbers of Black and minoritized young people who are being diagnosed and maybe being misrepresented, and which kind of goes to the top thing around the kind of adultification of our Black and minoritized children. And so we're hoping to kind of really create a wonderful dialogue and panel with parents who and of young people as well. So our youth conference, when this is all over in the summer and I can just collapse for a few months, will be hosted. We're currently we've got about, I think we've got 20 schools involved at the moment. So we have kind of over 200 children to hopefully deal with or give certificates to. Hopefully they're going to create some amazing youth social action. And that will kind of involve them really leading the whole conference. So for all the adults in the space, we will just be there to chaperone and to kind of usher them in and out of spaces. But we will hopefully work closely with the I Will campaign, because our I Will ambassador for Ipswich has been very kind of proactive in creating the original programme, and so we hope that they will be getting other young people to help host a really fun-packed afternoon. So that's kind of where we are with regards to having those conversations with young people. We'd love to kind of have a young person come in and tell their story. However, it's not really how we do things, because we know that some young people are amazing, and they'll be able to stand here and kind of advocate and say, yes, this is what we do and this is brilliant. However, to kind of get a really wider voice, we're kind of talking to lots of different young people, but hopefully by the next time you will have one of those here with you, or a video at least, to tell you what they've done. So that's us. I think that's about everything.
Thank you, Tonya. Before I hand over to you, Chair, just sort of maybe in closing, some of the background that I missed. So this piece of work is part of the Community Ambition Program, which was co-funded by the Ipswich and East Suffolk CCG and NHS charities together. And I suppose the ask today is really, as Tonya had said, at this stage, we're working with young people because this is about the young people, for young people. But if they're going to be our ambassadors around health in schools, in the community, they also need to know what health looks like. They also need to know what to tell other young people about what our health services look like. So at some point, we're going to be reaching out to you and saying, we want you to get involved. We want you to come and talk about the work that you're doing and educate these young people so that they can go out and be ambassadors, for our health services. But they also be coming to us and telling us about where things are failing and where things are going wrong and where we need to fix things. So that is sort of in a snapshot the piece of work that we are doing. Thank you.
Just on that one as well, Fanwa, sorry, we've done something very similar, and we now sit on the Suffolk Safeguarding Partnership, and just young people having a space at that table changes things. It really does. And it is about kind of saying, okay, well, how do we reach communities? How do we kind of share some of that kind of power, I suppose? And I think very much they would love the opportunity that after they've finished their ambassador course, what happens next? And so with social care, they've been really good at saying, okay, well, we have interview panels, we have opportunities where we need a group of young people. So it's really important that it's happening, because if you need young people that are trained, that are diverse, then we have them really, and they're eager to kind of to get involved. And we've had lots of young people, when we look at social mobility, that have gone on to do nursing and gone into social work and gone into teaching. So it's a really important process.
And I couldn't agree with you more, Tonya. Tonya, Ingrid, thank you so much for the presentation. And just hearing you talk about the work of volunteering matters, and particularly this youth social action, the co-production, the nothing about us without us, the looking at the impact of trauma, which we are seeing the outcome of that within our GP services, our mental health services, our physical health services. That issue about what matters to me, not what matters to me, but what matters to young people. What's happened to me, not what's the matter with me. That is such an important change in the way that we as health and care professionals need to approach particularly younger people, but also older people who are still living their adult in adult life with their adverse childhood experiences, and love the idea of Ideathon and you know, bringing the concept of that into how we work. And you know, 200 youth ambassadors. Wow, it's amazing. And each one of them hopefully in a position to influence another 200. Well, would be very, very a long way down the line of being able to help and support each other, wouldn't we? And this formative, creative, celebratory approach, building people's confidence to present themselves one way or another, but doing it in such a respectful way of using their lived experiences is fantastic. And I was at the Health and Wellbeing Board a week or so ago, where the council are looking at adverse childhood experience, the impact of it, and what can we do about this. And of course, this is such a great grassroots approach to it. And we know that in our deprived communities, those communities suffering inequality, if we don't do this, it's not going to get any better. And so linking up what you're doing with the ACEs work, what one of our training programs did with Ipswich Borough Council, looking at ACEs in deprived communities and what we could do in schools, there's such a lot of synergy between what you're doing and what is desperately needed, and emerging as a priority in our public services. So I would really be hoping that the work you're doing is going to be pushing on an opening door. So thank you for what you've done. And I've got lots of hands up, so I'm going to have to find out who's first. Well, whoever's first, it's going to be Ingrid first anyway. So Ingrid, welcome.
Oops. Thank you very much. Yes, I just really wanted to add on top of that. So one of the things that I do is that I'm an engagement manager in Voluntary Matter, and I lead on some of the work that Tonya has explained now and showcased to you. But really, rather than just speaking, I think there's nothing better than a video that some of the young people wanted to showcase to you. So I'm just going to share that and let them speak for themselves.
Wonderful.
Is the sound okay, or can you hear the sound?
I can't hear anything as yet, Ingrid.
Okay, so let me just see. What about now? No?
I can't hear the sound.
No, okay, so I think I need to share the sound. So let's just, if I go to settings.
Now, I hope you're all watching Ingrid at work, everyone, and how to do this more complex form of sharing.
Good computer sound, and it should be now okay. And if it's not, please let me know. How is that? Can you hear the sound?
No, I'm afraid not.
No, afraid not.
No.
Don't worry, we've got time.
I think you have to share your sound on your computer, Ingrid.
Which I did, but let me just see. I will try again. Share. I'm sorry for that.
That's okay.
We're just impressed you're even trying, Ingrid, to be honest with you.
I'm here waiting.
Because I'd be just like, give up now, thank you. I'm like, well done, Ingrid.
Thank you. So I have done it, and I hope it works. It'll be a shame if it's not working. Include computer sound. Yes. So include computer sound. No, please work. Okay. Oh, sorry. And now?
Yep.
Is it working?
I hear you.
Ah, fantastic. So let me just put it in. And there you go.
When I tell you it hurts, you don't see it, so you don't believe me. When you hear my accent, you think I'm not smart, so you ignore me. And if I cry, it's my parents' fault, or some illegal medicine I took, so you can't deal with me. When I advocate for myself, you don't trust me, so you call it attitude. And if I get frustrated and turn up the volume,
Emergency reach service.
I'm no longer a patient,
Do you need fire, police or ambulance?
but an aggressive adult. I am the expert of my own body. Why can't you hear me and listen?
Because you don't live it.
Because you don't see it.
Because no one around you is affected.
Just because you don't understand it doesn't mean that it does not exist.
Let's hear through the power of stories.
Let's acknowledge it through engagement with young people. A better world is coming, where young people like you can be part of change. No more discrimination, no more silence, no more taboos. And it's already happening. Young people like you are taking control of their well-being, they are supporting their peers, and they're no longer silent. Our Health Ambassador Network is the change of tomorrow. Are you with us?
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 And that's it. Good.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. I'm glad you shared that with us. It is got a really impactful message, isn't it? Don't block aspiration through your limiting assumption. And, you know, recruiting to be the change you want to see. I think it's a great video. So thank you. I'm just wondering whether we can borrow it to put into our website and promote through our channels, so that we can grow the impact of what you've done with those young people.
Absolutely. Tonya, she will be my Tonya is my boss, so I will let her. Tonya, you'll let them,
no, that's absolutely fine. We'll just need to put logos, But once we've done that, because we need the history and we need the funders and voluntary matters, but we'll send that over to you, Mark. That won't be a problem. I'll send it to Fanwa to forward to you.
Yeah. Is Simon on the call? Yes, he is. I'm sure he'll be chomping at the bit to get a hold of that.
Okay, no problem at all.
Okay, so who was next? Richard, I'm glad I held you up.
Hi, well, I'm Richard, Director of Strategy and Transformation for the CCGs. Thank you, and I'm with you. That was a really, really helpful, impactful presentation. I agree with everything Mark just said, and no jokes from some of my colleagues, but as a former youth ambassador myself many years ago, absolutely recognise the importance of engaging with young people and actually involving them co-producing some of the solutions because they know best. And with that in mind, Lisa, I can see, has put a hand up as well. I think it'd be really helpful if perhaps Lisa, Maddie and I could meet with you guys offline, because already there's lots of things I'm thinking about in terms of how we could absolutely bring you into some of the work that we're doing. The main thing that's happening at the moment is we're doing a bit of a review of our overall children's programme, children and young people's programme, across the council and the clinical commissioning groups. So obviously kind of thinking, where do we want to go over the next 4 years around how we're going to continue to improve outcomes for young people. And I think engaging you guys within that would be really, really helpful, but also in a lot of the different pieces of work we've got. I think the bigger challenge is going to be trying to manage capacity more than anything, because there's so many areas that you could get involved. So I've just messaged our lead for children's, Gary, who's very keen. I'm sure Leanne will be as our 2 children's leads to meet. So just an offer, I'll pick up offline through Fanwell then, Antonio, to kind of get something in with you. But thank you, really, really helpful.
Yeah, no, that's a good start. I was also thinking about, from an integrated care academy perspective, we've got our first anniversary coming up in May, and we were thinking about, okay, so what else do people want to see from the academy? And we've got an Anchors program, which is about promoting the health and social care as a career, and what we can do to support people at all stages of their education in their aspiration. So I think there's more conversations down that line too. Lisa.
Thank you, and just to agree with Richard, I think this is so needed, and we always talk about involving children and young people in the decisions that we make, but we don't do it consistently and reliably. So this is brilliant. My question was just about, and I suspect it's mitigated through the model that you use, but how it feels to be an ambassador. How does it feel for those young people? And the reason I ask is because I'm acutely aware we've had other people that have sort of sat in that place between statutory organisations and the communities and the people that they are advocates, ambassadors for, and it can be a really difficult place for them to keep their own personal resilience. We've got a Roma advocate working in the maternity programme, and she supports the Roma community, women, people who are pregnant. And she was talking to us at the maternity board about how her personal resilience has really been impacted because the people receiving the support and the advice she wants to give don't want to hear it, and how they feel towards her now. And I just wondered how you manage that and what it feels like to be an ambassador.
I think because we're working with children, I think as a kind of I come from a social work background, but I've been doing this job for about 13 years, and I think when you're doing youth social action, it is quite complicated. And it's so nice that you've noticed, actually, Lisa, because it's not just you train up a group of young people and then say, see you later. It's a lot of management and it's a lot of supporting and nurturing that growth. And I'm fortunate to have an amazing team. Ingrid is one of them. And so what we really do is because when you're working with someone who might have some lived experience, first it's about kind of developing and supporting them kind of getting them to a place where they're able to undertake one of our programs. So there's a lot of nurturing and support that goes into that, and a lot of distractions and kind of real reflection of our own experiences and how they've kind of molded our growth and who we are. And then what we do is we kind of then get them to work with each other, and they kind of create relationships within their own kind of networks, and we support that as well. So we're very proactive. And then when they go on to become ambassadors, because we actually have young people delivering the program, so we're actually supporting the young people that are delivering the program. So we do that by kind of weekly supervision and meetings. They're involved in lots of other stuff. We really do wrap around them, and that doesn't stop. So I set up a program called What's Up? Women Against Sexual Exploitation and Violence Speak Up. It started 10 years ago. Those young women have gone off to be mums, some have gone off to university, and we still kind of, I still kind of reach out and map where they are, track them, kind of meet them, to have coffee. And we've also created a What's Up Mama group so that they aren't isolated. So it takes a lot of kind of coordination, management, and it is complicated because it's volunteering, and but it's always about kind of checking in on them and making sure that they can roll on and off of programs as well. So some people may not be in a position where they can deliver, but they might help us shape that. And that might be a kind of hot chocolate every couple of weeks whilst they say, oh, I think you need to look at this. And so we do it, we kind of follow their pace, really. And we're there with very little funding, but we're there.
Thank you. And I've just had a message from Simon about connecting him with the video and also promoting the conference as well. Be very happy to do that for you. Imran.
Thanks, Mark. Hi, Tony. Hi, Ingrid. I'm Imran. I'm a local GP. My question is about youth offenders and the youth justice system. I mean, bear in mind 50% of our youth offender population is from a minority ethnic group. Have you had much engagement and support from either people who've come out of the system or are in the system? And is there something we can do to perhaps promote some of that?
I think, that would be wonderful. I mean, we do have various programs that I don't manage. So we have one that we got some endowment funding for, the endowment funding, and I think they are a peer collective group. So this is a program that is specifically focusing on youth crime. It's over, I think it's Suffolk, Norfolk and Essex. So I think we run it from Ipswich, but it's across those areas, and we've got different people in different places. That they recruit young people to start to develop a research base around kind of youth crime. And so we have got some stuff that we are doing. This, whether they will come over to our Health Ambassador program, most probably at the moment not. So they will be doing stuff specifically around there. We have also mentoring programs for young people who are not in education, employment and training. And we also try to pick up the young people who are leaving care. So we have a mentoring program specifically for young people who are leaving care. And they are matched with someone over 50 who supports the kind of transition from leaving care into independence. So we've got lots of these little ones, but a lot of the time, and when you can imagine, we kind of where the funding is. So that anything that we do extra is sometimes a bit of a challenge. So we do work with young people who are missing. So most of my stuff is kind of young people who might be affiliated with gangs. We have a touch-based program, which is looking at young people that have their independent interview by us rather than kind of social care. So we do a little bit like that because we know that they're kind of being possibly criminally exploited, and that's that bit of preventative but we're not in there with youth offending as much as we should be or would like to be. And I think that's mainly because I think youth offending, they're very statutory. This is what they need to do. And we're voluntary. So if you want to come and get involved and assert yourself or advocate, you can do that, and you can do it today. If you don't want to do it tomorrow, you don't have to. And I think with youth offending, when we've done some work before, they've been, okay, well, if they don't come, we're going to breach them. And I'm like, no, that's not really what volunteering's about. Volunteering's about, you need to know that you can see the change and invest in it, not be forced to do it. So we are, but it's a bit kind of, it's different programs.
Okay, thank you. We've got Lolu and then Dean.
Hi, Tanya and Ingrid. Thank you very much for your presentation and for all the work you're doing. I'm just amazed to hear the number of young people who've engaged in the last year, in spite of all what's happened in the last year. It's really encouraging to hear that young people are getting involved and doing things that really will help improve their well-being as well as advocating for others. I suppose it was a bit of a follow-on or segue from Imran's question. I was just thinking about children who are in care or care leavers, and thinking if you have any of the ambassadors who specifically are from that background. There's often my experience with children who sometimes come out of county into care. There's that sense of disconnection from everything and everyone else. And of course, going back to Mark's comments about adverse childhood experiences, many of them have several. And this just thinking that something like what you were describing, that sort of, the research does show that if they have one adult who is a trusted adult who can sort of wrap around them, like you were describing, like your program does, that can make the difference between where that child heads, what direction they head down. I'm just thinking whether that's something, whether those children do connect in with the Health Ambassadors program at all.
Yeah, well, as I say, because we have the schools that are signed up to our program, we haven't kind of said to the schools, have you got anyone that is in care? But maybe it is about doing a bit of a mapping process. So far, when we work with schools, we're really clear that we have a multilingual, very diverse team of volunteers and staff. So we kind of encourage them to really look at those children. But it is down to the school who they pick, I suppose. But we could most probably, but it wouldn't surprise me because we've in I think it's Claire Flintoff, who is the CEO of, I think, 13 schools, and all of her schools are doing the programme, and every single child in year 5, every single child in year 6. So the chances are we will have children that most probably are in care, definitely with adverse childhood experiences. So it may be that we do a bit of a mapping process. So, and kind of maybe ask the teachers, kind of, are these key issues? What are the main kind of key issues for the children that are attending? The older young people, yes. We've got young people that are unaccompanied, so they are on the programme. We kind of work with young people who have been in and out of care, have been missing. So most of the kind of older ones will kind of have some form of adverse childhood experience and would have most probably, but young offenders, usually lots of our stuff is around most probably just before that. So we work with young people at risk, but most probably not young people who are prolific offenders. No, I don't think we have many that I know of.
Okay, but yes, an important point that some targeting may help improve the impact even further.
This is just the first wave. So we've got the first one is from March to July, and then we will do one in the following kind of towards the end of next year. So even if we don't maybe capture them, I'm banking some of this because we can maybe do some much more focused targeting of other people.
Fantastic, great. Dean. Your mic is
sorry, is that better?
That's better.
Yeah, perfect. Apologies. Yes, three things quickly. First, thank you for taking on this mantle and doing this work. It's the seldom heard that really do inform what we need to do, so we can all trickle it out to the rest of the population in a caring way. The second thing is an apology, because obviously you're quite resource stretched, and you've come on here and have had multiple sort of asks. Just an offer, which is the third thing, I'm sort of from myself and the team that I'm sort of support. There is a project possibly launching in autumn of 2022, working with the University College London, Inspire, about social prescribing in children. Just a quick statistics: sort of 1 in 6 children suffer from a mental health problem, but only 1 in 50,000 of the social prescribing referrals into the social prescribing, as compared to the over 65s, sort of get that referral in. So essentially, it's a project where your voice and all of the resources that you you gently sort of hold, and all the plates that you are spinning. It's just an offer to possibly scale what you do in terms of producing sort of very quick outcomes. So if you could just share your details with us, we'll probably set up a sort of a meeting and hopefully get what you do at scale. But thank you.
Thank you very much, Dean. Thank you.
Thank you. Simon, did you want to come in? Are you there?
I am here. Yeah, I do apologise. My internet connection is particularly rubbish today. So I just wanted to say, fascinating presentation, Tonya. Thank you very much indeed. If it would be of use and of interest to you, we produce a regular briefing for our system partners and our members of the public. We can showcase your group and the work you're doing in your upcoming presentation with young people, if that will be of interest to you, and we can make contact and have a conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Simon. Thank you.
Okay, so Ingrid, Tonya, thank you so much for coming and sharing the fantastic work that you've been doing. I hope you feel that you've had a lot of support from us here, practical support, moral support, and if there's more we can do to connect to try and get you additional financial support, that would be just as welcome, I'm sure. So please do take advantage of those media promotional work that we can do for you. On behalf of the board, can I just say thank you for coming, and we wish you all the best for the work that you're doing and hearing more about the impact that you're having, and best of luck for what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, such a heartening set of messages to hear, and hearing about how people want to get some control over how their lives can be impacted. Fantastic. Just sorry to have to bring you back to the rest of the agenda. On that note, shall we go to procurement update, Paul? And there was a question from Mr. Dooley that we were notified before, one of which was around how much we're spending. I don't know if you want to address that.
I can have a go, Mark. It's not an issue. So I mean, I'll deal with that point first. I think so. I think the amount of the independent sector that we use is part of public consumption. So every time we undertake a procurement, that is published and sort of notified sort of publicly. So it's essentially, there is no doubt that we have been using independent sector, particularly around elective recovery. Again, asking for public record, particularly on a national framework and within an actual framework. So again, whilst I couldn't possibly share some of the more commercially sensitive, I would be happy to share outside this meeting any of the particular private providers we're using at the moment. That is no secret, and we made that quite public. So happy to do that. That won't be a problem. In terms of the procurement paper, absolutely agree with you, Mark. To follow that sort of a patient story with procurement feels a bit dry, really, but I'll be relatively quick. So just to note, the paper pathology procurement is on its way. The teams are working towards an April start, and I've not heard anything is delaying that. It's clearly a lot of work is happening around that. Mental health assurance is ongoing, as it is set out in the paper. There is some inbuilt delay because of a number of reasons, such as CQC and other issues. But again, the work is ongoing. On a slightly more positive note, we've completed the procurement process for the Safe Haven connector, community connector, and the mental health framework, which will be subject to part 2 discussion later, and we should be in a position to actually award, which is great news in terms of the progress. And finally, just to note that the new provider selection regime is sort of gathering pace. There is a consultation at the moment. Jane Garnett, who's our sort of senior lead for procurement, is currently gathering comments on back of that consultation. Should any of the board members be interested, happy to send the consultation paper, and you're happy to come and capture your comments on it. Some of it's quite technical, but if you're interested, please let me know and I'll make sure you get a copy of it. Other than that, Mark, I'll stop there.
Thank you. Any questions for Paul on those? And I mean, alongside independent sector through limited companies, we do a lot of procurement using community interest companies and our voluntary sector as well, with quite significant contracts with them. Okay, so if there are no further questions to that, shall we do Jane's paper next on financial planning and then have a short break?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So there's quite a lot of process issues packed into a fairly small paper, but probably the most interesting bit for the governing body is to talk about the planning round that that Richard mentioned in his introduction, that we're in the middle of for 22-23. So the paper sets out that the timetable for the planning round is unfortunately doesn't work particularly well for our governing bodies. We submitted our draft plans too late for the papers for this. We submitted those late last week, and they are a combination, as you've seen before at governing body, of workforce plans, financial plans, overall narrative, a plan that sets out trajectories for achievement of the various waiting times and other targets across the NHS. So a draft was submitted last week in line with the timetable. There's, I think it's fair to say there's still quite a lot of work to do. We've made really good progress on that, but there's still some work to do on, particularly on some of the target areas and in terms of overall as a system on looking at the finances and how they're best deployed across the patch. So in the paper, what we have done is we unfortunately have to put it in our final version of the plan before we meet again as a governing body. So I've suggested in the paper a mechanism for ensuring that we've got proper sign off of that, which is that we delegate authority for the sign off of the final plan to the Finance Committee, our Financial Performance Committee on the finance side, and the remainder of it, but with an oversight of the financial plan, going to the Clinical Executive Committee. And then in due course to bring it back, hopefully by the May governing body, so that people can see the overall sense of the plan at our public meeting. So hopefully, Chair, that is something that the governing body is able to do. Do you want me to just carry on through the rest of the paper and then pick up at the end? Okay. So that's on the plan. In terms of the budget, we as statutory organisation have to have a budget from the 1st of April. We are working through the detail of that as part of the planning process, but given that we won't have got that finally signed off until the end of April, early May, I'm just asking the governing body to roll over the current budget arrangements so that we have something formally in place for the start of the financial year. And then the remainder of the paper is suggesting that as we are continuing as CCGs into the next financial year, before we formally become the integrated care body, I'm suggesting that we keep in place a couple of areas that we've been using in the sort of broad finance arena for the last couple of years. One of those is continuing our COVID Resource Allocation Committee, the CRAC Committee, which is a committee that works across the 3 CCGs in Suffolk and North East Essex. As it says in the paper, we use it very rarely now, but it still has a useful role, particularly in terms of oversight of separate central funding streams, such as for the COVID vaccination programme. So rather than stand that committee down, suggesting that we keep it in place, we only use it as and when's required, and the reporting for that goes back through the Finance Committee, and the minutes come to the board. So I'm hoping that the board is supportive of that suggestion. And then finally, during the COVID period, we have been operating with a set of changed financial delegation arrangements. Again, we use them very rarely, but I'm suggesting that rather than taking those away, we keep those in place in case they're required, just until the formation of the ICB when that happens in due course. So a number of bits and pieces in the paper, Chair, but hopefully they're all set out in the recommendations in section 4, and I'm obviously happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jane. And as you say, key bits are the list of recommendations, noting that, as you say, the timetabling of all of this with, it was supposed to be the end of the governing body, wasn't it, today? Now stretched to July, but with just the one meeting in May, I think is the proposal. So any questions about the detail for Jane on that? I thought it was laid out quite straightforwardly in terms of what we're needing to do. I don't see any questions about details. So when it comes to the recommendations, do we have any questions about the recommendations? I'm going to take them in full just in case anyone has any queries about them. I don't see any questions about those either, Jane. So I think the governing body is noting all of those recommendations and delegating approvals and extensions as set out in those recommendations. So thank you for that. So can I suggest that we take a break until, shall we say 8:30, 8 minutes enough, and come back to start on the integrated performance report. So just a reminder to turn off your camera and microphone, and we'll meet again at 8:30. So if people can turn cameras on when they're back, and then we'll know we can make another start. Thank you.
I saw that chocolate bar, Jane.
Yes.
We all did.
I wish it were chocolate, but it's not.
Yeah, I hope you're declaring that promotion on behalf of the company.
Sorry, I didn't mean it like that.
Product placement. I didn't think we did that in the CCG, but maybe we could. So, shall we move into the integrated performance report? Paul, shall I hand over to you to guide us through that? Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I'll give a bit of an introduction, and I'm sure colleagues will want to come in on the transformational bit and the quality and the finances. If I can start by saying, as trailed by Richard and yourself, we remain at level 4 escalation. There was clearly a view that we would start to de-escalate in this week or so, but clearly the COVID numbers, as you said, Mark, are going up, and the latest news is actually that we are likely to stay in level 4 for a little while longer in terms of a sort of national escalation down to local command and control. So as a consequence of that, clearly, as a system, we've been focusing on some key priorities, which I'll go through in a second. And you'll note that as the reports look slightly different this time, and that's in part because some of our monitoring has stood down a little bit, and in part because we need to focus on the things we've been directed to focus on. So, in other words, covering elective recovery, cancer, urgent care, mental health, and vaccination in particular. The other thing to add, just as a prelude, we have been working in the last 12 months on Power BI, which is actually a piece of software that allows us to integrate data a little bit differently, start thinking about how we present the data, and if you want, at the first outing of some of that data, and we can shape it. So again, apologies, it's quite in a high level volume. It'll get refined as we move forward, and hopefully become much more intelligent as we do. But I hope you find the presentation helpful, and if not, please contribute, and happy to change it in any way that might be helpful. So if I can just pick up on a few key areas, and then invite some of my colleagues to comment. So in terms of elective recovery, as you know, we've been directed to maintain urgent elective cases through our theatres, and we've also been instructed quite widely to start reducing our 104-week wait. So in other words, 2-year plus patients waiting. We are pretty much on track to hit the trajectory we've set ourselves to the end of March, but as the planning guidance actually established, we need to make sure we have no 104-week waits beyond the end of June. And again, I'll talk about that in a bit in terms of the next steps. You'll note that mutual aid has carried on. The data on the report does show that SNF is worsening slightly. That is a direct consequence of mutual aid. In other words, West Suffolk are passing some patients over to SNF, and the figures are showing in SNF. But overall, we are doing pretty well in terms of mutual aid, and it's worth noting not that we seek that aspiration, but in terms of our RTT, I think we're probably first in the region in terms of our traction, in terms of improvement. Not that we want to go beyond that. We want to accelerate that even further in terms of our patients. We continue to use the indemnity sector quite heavily, and that is set to continue to try and support our recovery. And as you'll notice within the report, we have some significant pressure into our diagnostics. And whilst many of the diagnostics are fairly stable, we are seeing a real increase in the referrals, and our providers are at the moment seeking additional capacity to be able to meet some of that demand, and it sort of takes into 22-23 planning. So again, looking forward, and it's a conversation we've tried previously, we've been set a number of priorities around elective. We've been set to achieve 110% of our activity over and above 1920 baseline. We've been essentially instructed to carry on reducing our over 52 weeks, eradicate the 104-week wait, which we have plans for, and try to minimize the number of over 78 weeks that we have as a next step. We've just submitted some initial plans into region, and they're currently looking at those. I'm pleased to report that the vast majority of the ask are likely to be delivered into our early planning, but again, that's going through a number of conversations. So again, the system is really responding to the ask in terms of 22-23 into elective recovery. I have to say, though, there are a number of risks attached to that, and that clearly is COVID, and workforce will be clearly a risk in terms of achieving some of that. So again, that conversation is ongoing. Just moving on in terms of urgent emergency care, as trialed again, we remain on level 4, so our command and control sort of tactical structure remains in place. Our COVID rate, sadly, over the last couple of weeks has significantly increased, and the report states around 97 patients, and actually we're closer to probably 210 patients now, and possibly going up. The general intelligence suggests that we are not likely to peak in terms of COVID numbers for another 3 weeks or so. So again, we're having to look at what we might do to adapt to that moving forward. It's important to note that at this stage, these are not patients necessarily being admitted because of COVID. These are patients who are admitted because, and they have actually had COVID, part of the testing regime that takes place within the hospital setting. One of the other areas we're clearly watching is our critical care numbers, and those are going up slightly, whilst there isn't actually a belief at the moment regionally that we're likely to see a significant increase. We are watching that into our patients as move forward. So in terms of the other general supporting measures, our discharges have maintained very well. So we talked about criteria to reside. In other words, patients are waiting to be discharged and are being sort of delayed for whatever reasons. And there are probably 4 main reasons, pathway 1, 2 and 3, which is detailed within the report, and also looking at some internal delays within the hospitals and other partners are currently undertaking perfect weeks and make what we call made event to really focus on discharge processes that are actually in place. So there is some good news story in the sense that we have managed to maintain a certain level of patient flow, which has been much more problematic in some of our wider system regional partners. Having said that, we remain under significant pressure at the moment, and clearly if COVID numbers were to continue going up, we may be having to think about cancelling some elective activities, which is not what we would want to do, but clearly we are keeping that under constant review as we move forward. If I was to point within the report a particular area of concern, I would point to the ambulance service. You will notice that our C1 to C4 response rate are way out of kilter where they should be. We are working actively with our partners to try and minimise the impact on the ambulance service as much as possible. So a number of initiatives around ambulance conveyancing, and you'll note within the report, I think that our ambulance conveyancing has actually reduced over time. It's not gone up. Whilst we are conveying a greater percentage of patients, the overall number appears to be reducing. That doesn't mean to say we don't have any greater aspirations, and we are moving to try and address some of those issues and try and go further if we can. If I were to say what is compounding some of the issues, I would say workforce clearly an issue, particularly with COVID. A rise in activity regionally, it's as much a regional problem as it is a local problem, and clearly there is a sense that maybe some of the patients we are getting are probably a little bit sicker than perhaps they were. So again, we are having this conversation with the ambulance service to try and improve the position, but it is a system, it is a service which is under significant amount of pressure, which is subject to local conversations and regional conversations as we move forward. So again, just quickly summarize some of the bits. Cancer, you'll notice we are making relatively good progress, in particularly SNEFT, as probably the highest number of 62 days have been treated in comparative terms across England, which is great to see. There are clearly recovery plans in place to try and recover the waiting list size by March 2023, and that is very much in train. You'll see that's been achieved through a number of routes, additional capacity being put on, change in pathways, new roles, etc., is very much part of the report where we're trying to address the CANCAT services. And finally, just to mention vaccination, and just again to reiterate the case, we are continuing to do well in our vaccination programs. And just to signal again that we are launching this, we've launched this week over 75 and immunosuppressed patients over 12 as a trying to increase our second booster going forward. So I would qualify the sort of the system pressures as being quite significant. As a system, we've managed to keep patient flow going, trying to maintain safety as much as we can. We are probably one of the system across the whole region that has managed to maintain a level 3 OPO. But I do worry, given the rising COVID numbers we are seeing in the last week or so, whether that's going to increase the significant pressure we have in the system. So I'm going to pause there and invite some of my colleagues who might want to actually contribute further to that conversation. And I see there are a couple of hands up.
Yeah, let's start with the hands, shall we? Imran first, and then Lolly.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Paul. Just on ambulance, no surprise. I'm not surprised conveyancing's reduced, because if the ambulances are stacked and we're not got them out on the roads, and we are all unfortunately having to make decisions on the ground where we're telling patients with critical issues to go themselves. I mean, in the last week, I think we've sent 2 patients with ECG changes that's suggestive of an MI from the surgery straight to hospital in families' cars and things like that, which is obviously so no surprise conveyancing's down. I mean, it's definitely, that's not a good story. The other issue is we're talking about ambulance and support for the ambulance service, but the impact it's having on the rest of the system and clinicians on the ground in particular is something that I feel we still haven't addressed. I haven't still seen anything coming out from the system to clinicians to support them in some of those very difficult decisions that they're having to make, and making sure that they're not feeling that they're putting themselves as individual clinicians at risk because of system failing. So that is something I know I've talked to Lisa about, and we've talked about this many, many times before. That is something we need some support for very rapidly, because as you say, COVID numbers are going up. Respiratory illness in itself is significantly going up at the moment. I mean, these last 2 weeks, I'm sure some of my other colleagues on the ground would say the same, have been the busiest we've had in a long time. So we really need that support for the clinicians on the ground who are managing all this, not to mention COVID booster programs, all of that sort of stuff. So it's great that we're doing well, but I fear that we're doing well in spite of the system support for some of the people on the ground, and we need that urgently.
If I can come back to Imran, just to be clear, I don't think I'm suggesting we're doing well. I'm suggesting we are in the position we wouldn't want to be in. But actually, I think the system is trying to manage as best it can given the pressures. But I take the point, and I know that's something you pushed at some point ago. The only thing I would add is we are desperately trying to break out of the I would call the short-term reaction into what we do. So we are trying to establish an urgent care committee as part of the new structure going to ICB, which hopefully will be starting in early April. And we are setting a number of ambitions. And one of the conversations has to be, how do we involve primary care within that conversation? So again, I'll be picking up as part of that. In terms of messaging, I know we've had conversations with Lisa and ourselves in terms of what message we can give. I'm sure we can pick that up outside the meeting again. Thank you.
Thank you. Lolly?
Hi, Paul. Sorry, I'm not turning my camera back on because my internet is acting up again. The question I had is just in reference to vaccination, and it might be well be coming up again on someone else's update, but just because we had a patient this week at the surgery, probably the first one we've had to admit in a long time, and he was unvaccinated, and the only reason was not because he was anti-vax or anything, just because he was needle phobic, and every time he tried, he hadn't been able to, he'd become overwhelmed standing in the queue and left. And I just wondered if there's, we gain with this rise in numbers, whether there's something specific we can put on and advertise to people. There might be people like him, quite a few, sitting out there wanting to have a vaccine, but really resistant or really afraid of, needle phobia is quite significant for some people. I don't know. I can't recall that we did anything specific around that in the initial campaign, but is there something perhaps we could think about doing now as we, as we are in this current wave, that might encourage people and help them to take it on.
Yeah, thanks. I think Maddie probably wants to comment on this point. Sorry.
Thanks, Lulu. We have had some dedicated clinics, and that's certainly something that we can look at further as part of the evergreen offer, because the offer of the first, second, or other vaccinations are always open. So we can look at that, and as we move forward within all of the different offers that we have within pharmacy, primary care, medical care, and within our vaccination centres. So thank you for raising it, and I will pick that up today.
Thank you, Maddie. And maybe it's just perhaps even letting surgeries know if there's particular clinics or pharmacies that are catering specifically to the needle phobic, so we know where to direct patients who we come across who might want to, access that as in a specific type of clinic.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. We will do that.
Thank you. Imran, did you want to come back on that?
So I was just going to say, I remember the Fed did set up some special needlephobic clinics, didn't they? And I think the mass vac centres also tried to help and support with some of that as well. But I'm not. The other question I was suggestion I was going to make was about the vaccine bus, but I hear it's headed off to Ukraine. So that could have been a really useful sort of also, way of doing things as well, because the pressures seem much less there.
Indeed. Did you want to say something to that, Maddie?
Yes, so just to say, absolutely, one of the buses has gone to Ukraine. There is a second bus, however, so hopefully we will be able to continue that mobile programme as well alongside.
Thank you. Pete.
Thanks. Thanks, Mark. It's just a couple of points. I shall leave my camera off because I'm not looking at my best. I'm recovering from COVID myself at the moment. Couple of things about that actually Paul's highlighted in the elective. One is the increasing use of advice and guidance rather than outpatient referrals. We're doing that both in across both here and North East Essex, and actually in a couple of specialties we actually plan to pilot advice and guidance as a default method of referral to improve our outpatient performance. That's a way forward. Just to back up what Paul says about diagnostics is particularly challenged, and we're working to make sure that we get a community diagnostic hub in our CCG like the one down in Clacton. Couple of things about the cancer, particularly around the volume of referrals. We've actually done a lot of work to restore 2-week wait referrals to pre-pandemic level, and it's good to see that. But in fact, the volume of referrals is now actually exceeding pre-pandemic levels. In our area, we've managed to restore volumes in particularly around prostate and lung, which has not been the case in other areas of the country. However, we need to do more. We're going to be doing more work over the coming months to actually try and make those referrals a bit more specific, if you like. And also to highlight that we pay a lot of attention to 2-week wait referral data, and that's often the first thing that people look at cancer data. Well, that 2-week wait standard is going to be removed, and we're going to be, the important one is going to be the 28-day faster diagnosis standard, i.e. every patient referred on a cancer pathway will have a definitive diagnosis within a 28-day time frame. And ESNEF and both all local hospitals are doing relatively well at that, but that will be the key stat in the future to look at.
Yes, and the key stat will actually be, have we increased the number of people whose staging diagnostic is stage 1, more so even than 2, and reducing the stage 3 and 4. That's the ultimate outcome that we want to achieve. And I was going to say, let's make no apology for stretching the diagnostic demand, as long as the quality assurance around that is in place, and that we share the learning where that's appropriate. Richard, you.
Yeah, just while we're on cancer, rather than dipping around later on, so just to add to what Pete and Paul have said, we're at 150. I'm just looking at my other screen. We're at 115% of pre-pandemic levels on 2-week wait referrals and 110% on 31-day treatment. So we're actually one of the highest in region in terms of getting back and exceeding those pre-pandemic levels. And as Paul alluded, ESNEFT remains one of the highest trusts in the country in terms of its volume of treatments undertaken. So even though its performance on 62 days is around 73, which is against the 85% standard, the sheer scale of what it's doing, I think, is in a good position given how much it's currently seeing. We are in the process of revising or looking to update our overall cancer strategy for the ICS, so it runs out at the end of March. So we're trying to find some support externally to look at that. And if you've alluded to, Mark, I think our higher ambition remains those earlier diagnosis, which has taken a hit over the last 2 years, it's fair to say. So we've got quite a long way to climb, I think, to get back to where we need to against the national ambition and our local ambition against that. And also just to make a plug that we've also gone out for expressions of interest, a recruitment to both our ICS cancer lead and our GP cancer leads from each of the 3 alliances. So we're hoping to conclude that process by the end of April.
Okay, thank you. And I mean, I suppose we should be able to plan for what is an optimal capacity based on what, you know, information around what kind of conversion rates are indicative of being ahead of the game for stage 1 and 2, and having a shared understanding of what that capacity needs to be and what we need to be aiming for would be helpful from, and by shared I mean commonly understood between primary care and secondary care over what referral demands are being are needed to support that overall outcome. Lorna.
I make a comment. Mark's absolutely right about trying to bring the number of stage 1 cancer diagnoses up so that the ultimate outcome is improved survival for more people with cancer, which is a really important thing. But also on the back of this, you know, the patients that I'm seeing now for non-cancer work like osteoarthritis, during the 2-year period over COVID, there have been many more people who've gone from being in pain with moderate osteoarthritis to being up all night with pain and in a wheelchair. Just staggering deterioration in their quality of life and in their general well-being and their cardiovascular system, and everything has deteriorated. And I think that there's I'm not surprised that the demand growth has gone up, and I think there are a lot of patients out there who have deteriorated over this period, and we're going to be doing quite a lot of catch up to try to get back to where we were before COVID. And it's you know, these are very deserving people as well. You know, I think it's when you're in your mid 70s or late 70s and you haven't got dementia and you're stuck in a wheelchair, unable to enjoy the last 5 years of your life properly, I think that that's a really, really tough thing for them. Anyway, it's just a, you know, we've concentrated a lot on cancer, which is right, but there's huge unmet need in other areas of healthcare as well, which I just wanted to highlight.
Yeah, and it isn't all about the numbers that we see in here. It's about people's experience as a consequence of what's happening. That's important that we sort of capture less well. But I have to say, I think the Power BI presentations are really good. Paul, Jane, that kind of presentation is really helpful, and I know that the team have been wanting to get their hands on it for some time and can see the benefit of it. So thank you for that. Paul, did you want to come back?
Yeah, just to come back on Lorna's point, I think, Lorna, you're absolutely right. At the bottom of this is capacity across the board. So our initial submission plans as a system is that all organisations have said they will be able to achieve 110% of above threshold. than 1920. So again, that's nowhere near to where it needs to be. It needs to be much higher than that. But clearly, they're working on stretching as much as we can both in terms of, again, independent sector and workforce to try and service that. Equally, in terms of diagnostics, both organizations pretty much fed back that they think they can get to 120% of baseline activity. So again, stepping up the capacity. But you're absolutely right, Lorna. It's going to take us a bit of time to actually recover that. And the organisation are really pushing hard now on the back of the ERF funding, which is coming through to try and improve our capacity, essentially, to try and clear, particularly the people who've been waiting a very long time. And both trusts have set a really high ambition to try and get rid of 78 weeks. There'll be a couple of special where it's going to be difficult, but essentially pretty much across most specialities, they said they're probably not going to be able to achieve that. So again, a lot of effort, but absolutely don't underestimate the challenge, and the poor patients that are waiting, and deteriorating is absolutely something we want to try and avoid.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Paul. So shall we move the conversation on? Lisa, did you want to talk about quality, any particular aspects? I know we've covered a little bit of it in the...
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And
anything else?
Absolutely. And I think I love the new approach in the IPR from the business intelligence team. I think the kind of utopia would be when we can link outcomes to the access and targets, because I think we're still kind of looking at some of the demand and capacity work here and outcome work over there, and it would be great to be able to bring that together a little more. But as you say, the main quality outcome issues and quality of care issues that we are seeing across all our providers are really related to the demand and the delays of access into our services, and that's creating outcomes that we really measure through incidents, which isn't great. And there really is some big work that we need to do over the next few months to really link those outcomes in a better way. As Paul and Richard have both talked about, we've got increased COVID patients with COVID in our acute sector, and they are not necessarily unwell with COVID, but the impact that we see on our workforce has increased, which obviously then impacts on the quality of care that is given. I think from just looking at individual providers and thinking about things that hasn't been discussed already, I think ESNEFT would want us just to raise one of their biggest quality concerns, which is around the numbers of children and young people that are accessing the acute sector for mental health needs and presenting in acute crisis with different root causes. Sometimes it's about placement breakdown, and sometimes it's about not being able to access services quickly enough to prevent that acute crisis. But the concerns that ESNEFT and West Suffolk have around being able to provide the right environment and the right care, even with the support of our mental health and local authority colleagues, it's not the right place and the right care for those children. So there is Richard's chairing a system piece of work to look at what can we do as a system to not only look at our tier 4 access, but what can we do to support our acute services, and are we doing all the right things to prevent the acute crisis in the first place? ESNEFT have taken the step to move to lower the visiting restrictions, which I think is in line with the national direction. It does provide them with additional challenges, but they have now moved visiting to two people for 2-hour slots, which is being received really well from the public, and absolutely supports that family-centred care approach in ESNEFT. In NSFT, you'll see from the information for CYP, there's some significant work happening around the eating disorder pathways and the emotional wellbeing hub. It's really great that the urgent timescales for urgent referral standards for eating disorders, and also the children and young people who are triaged as requiring red and amber timeliness within mental health services are being met within timescales, but there's still, as you'll see in the pack, some work that needs to be done, but significant input in those areas from our voluntary sector colleagues as well, which is really good. The first response service, which has been an area that has caused us concern due to the high numbers of people that are accessing that service within NSFT, and some of the response times and the call response times, which has given us concern. There's 2 pieces of work that they are specifically doing to look at the frequent people who are feeling that they need to call that support service a number of times. So the support to high frequency callers through the green light service, and also looking at their own internal processes of referral to make sure that, again, the right people are getting to the right service straight away. We are still waiting, unless my colleagues tell me anything else, because I've been on annual leave, but I don't believe we've had the CQC reports for NSFT yet, so we're still waiting for the final draft, for the final report from CQC. And equally with ESEC has received their CQC report, and they have been given a requires improvement scoring, which actually for safe and caring they were scored as good, which is really important, but they effectiveness and well led were requires improvement, which has given them the overall reading of requires improvement. And I think just to finish, Paul's talked about the concerns with the ambulance service, and particularly in Ipswich and East Suffolk, the C1 response times, the C3 response times are not where we would need, and we know that impacts on the aggregated picture of people's outcomes when there is a delay from primary care, delays in primary care, delays in the ambulance service, and then delays in the emergency department in EAU. So I think it's all about the increased demand that we've been seeing and the capacity that we have across all our providers that are causing the biggest quality concerns. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Just in terms of the ambulance that you were talking about there, I don't disagree with what you said, but I think there are also a multitude of other coordination impacts that we know that we're potentially missing, and that I think the sooner we're able to meet around that perfect day report from the ambulance service, I think the sooner we can look at where else the opportunities are beyond the capacity in terms of how we support each other, as Imran says, having to make decisions around people who are potentially quite unwell, which you wouldn't have to make under normal circumstances, is potentially morally injurious to everyone involved, and we know that that's not a place that we want to be in, either within an ambulance service or in a GP practice, or somebody who is sitting at home without any completely unmitigated clinical care around them. I think it is a big challenge for us, and the response times, I suppose, are a barometer for coordination of community care as much as the 4-hour wait in A&E was, when it existed, is seen as a barometer of the way the whole system is working and coordinating. So I think primary care colleagues and our community-based colleagues would really want to get round, okay, how do we improve that? How do we improve that coordination between us? How do we improve the challenge of getting the ambulance to the place that it's really needed, in terms of priority. Any other questions for Lisa? So who's next? Is it Richard?
Thanks, Mark. So I'll try not to repeat the nature of us going in turn, some of the comments that have been made previously. So on cancer, I think we've covered that off, but there's more detail in the slide pack. In terms of mental health, I would agree with Lisa. I think our main performance-related challenges remains eating disorders, which is not new to the governing body. So pleased to say that they are now, NSFT is in earnest recruiting. So we have seen improvement, it's fair to say, over the last 3 months since October. But it remains quite volatile given the low numbers impact significantly on the percentage achievement. We're not unique. Most of the region is struggling around children and people's eating disorder. There is more work to do around that. Dementia prevalence, dare I say, Maddie might cover this as well, remains red for us. There's in the region, there's only 2 CCGs that have actually achieved this. All other CCGs have actually deteriorated over the last year or so. It's starting to slowly improve, but in Ipswich and East we're at 58.8 against the 67% target. So more concerted work to do, ongoing, nothing new around trying to continue to improve against that. Other than that, actually, broadly for mental health, we've got green or a couple of ambers in Ipswich and East, comparably to other areas of the region on IAPT, intervention, psychosis, etc. More broadly, Maddie and I are working particularly hard at the moment on our community mental health model alongside NSFT, Imran as our clinical lead and the Primary Care Network clinical directors. So it's fair to say we've got some challenges that we're working through, but we're hoping to try and resolve those in the coming days and weeks. Turning to children's, again, Lisa's flagged the challenges we've got around CAMHS Tier 4. Again, not a new challenge, but we had I thought quite a helpful 1 hour, it's quite tight, but 1 hour summit. And we've got a further meeting, I think, in a couple of weeks. There's a small task and finish group that Leanne Joyce is now leading to try and put some concrete costed proposals together for when we next meet. So again, hopeful that we will start to see some improvements around that. In a similar vein, pleased to say that the Emotional Wellbeing Hub demand is coming down. I think we're just over 1,000 now. We started at over 2,500. So we've been steadily working on that in the background. 2 things that I think will continue to change that in a positive way is we've now launched the Barnardo's-led Children and People and Parents Helpline for all things emotional wellbeing and neurodevelopmental. And we've also now started the neurodevelopmental disorders coordination function and panels. So effectively, they're now looking at all new cases through a multidisciplinary panel of health and social care workers supported by Barnardo's to find the best route forward for each of those young people. So we've got, bless you, Lisa, we've got positive developments in both of those areas. Happy to have got more detail if colleagues would like. And then just more broadly, a few other bits going on. Dental. So we've also got a dental task force that has now met twice, which is looking at practical ways that we locally might be able to improve some of the challenging positions that we find ourselves in, not just in Suffolk, but across the country, I think, in terms of dental recovery. We're particularly looking at urgent dental access and what we might be able to do around that, and particularly at some of our more specialised areas, such as looked after children. We've got some proposals around what we're going to be doing, hopefully, around that. And then just finally on acute collaboration, we've also got some work that's kicked off between ESNET and West Suffolk Foundation Trust in the context of national ambition around performing acute provider collaboratives, just to understand what some of the opportunities, risks and benefits might be. So we've got an external partner working with us to look at a number of structured interviews with various stakeholders across the 2 trusts and the system. And we're hoping for the first outputs of that in a couple of weeks' time, which will then help set the rest of that work moving forward. So as always, plenty going on. Happy to take any questions, more material in the pack if colleagues have had a chance to read.
Thank you. So any questions for Richard? I mean, like Lisa was indicating earlier, I think linking what we're doing in transformation and in all of our wider work through to outcomes is going to be vital for the integrated care board. and taking a common approach to what we choose to measure that is, important to us, not just in terms of what gets reported to NHS England, but actually our responsibility that we have to our population to improve their health, I think, is going to be really important. And as the number of transformation charters that we've got there, and how we transfer those, the content of that into the outcomes accountability framework, the measures that we choose to work towards, what are we going to measure as proxies towards those outcomes, as much as what are the KPIs set by the centre, and really see that driven through that population health management approach, and that the outcomes or the outputs that we're reporting to the centre are as a consequence of us being focused on delivering the outcome, not the target. I think that'll be really good for us to get ambassadorial around. Richard.
Sorry, Mark, just with that in mind, a couple of things. We've also had approval through our Integrated Care System Board about 2 weeks ago to launch 2 options appraisals. One is on development potentially of an intelligence function, and the second is a little technical, but effectively in relation to population health management. How can we move towards a linked data set, which will start to do what Mark's just described, which hope both of those pieces will try and get us to that nirvana of having a clear outcomes, measurable, short, medium and longer term, that then is much clearer with our transformation programs, what we're aspiring to. And with that in mind, I'm hoping to use cancer as an example of how we might be able to get there in terms of that OBA approach. And ditto with mental health for Suffolk, we have already over the last 2 years co-produced what are those I statements, those outcomes that our population want, and then how can we have measurable quantitative and qualitative metrics to achieve that. So particularly for those 2 programmes, I'd like to see how we can move faster along the lines you've just described, Mark, and there'll be others I'm sure that we could do through the alliance approach. Maddie, I know, Mark, you've started doing some thinking around that.
Indeed. In fact, we're going to have a little tryout today around one of the old persons outcomes, and the charter that we have for them, just to try it out and see how it feels. So any other questions? In which case, who's next? Do you know, I'd have thought after 10 years I've got the hang of this, but Jane.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So included in the pack is the finance report for the CCG up to the end of February, so month 11. We're rapidly approaching the end of the current financial year. We reported the financial position in detail to the Financial Performance Committee last week, but just for the governing bodies, a few highlights for the governing body. So we are on track to achieve our break-even financial position by the year end after receipt of the central allocations for hospital discharge programme and elective recovery fund. There are a few variances set out in the pack, but nothing of significance. You'll remember that we submitted a revised plan for the second half of the year. This year's been the year of 2 halves, and so we were able to capture in there some of the pressures we were experiencing, particularly around continuing healthcare. But I'm pleased to say that our revised figures for those for the second half of the year have been what the actuals have been. So we've not seen any further particular pressure in those areas. So I'll leave it there, Chair, unless there are any questions.
Okay, as you say, we've gone through this quite a bit. I don't see any other hands up. Maddie, did you want to talk about anything primary care?
Thank you. Although I'm delighted that in the course of the meeting, lots of people have done my work for me. Thank you by many updates, which is really brilliant, isn't it? I think that shows how we're all kind of thinking and working together. But just to summarise and bring that together, it's absolutely appropriate to say that primary care is under significant pressure. we have much better information now about the volumes of appointments and the clear pattern across the week, so particularly Mondays and Fridays, and we can see how that changes over time. So whilst it is it can be very consistent, we can see when there are real exacerbations and challenges within a month, and responding and how we're able to respond to that. The staffing challenges has been mentioned relating to COVID. Primarily, I'm pleased to say that all practices are open and well done, and thank you to all of them for that incredible work, because it has been with some immense staffing challenges, and I know people have given up annual leave and have worked incredibly flexibly to sustain that position. That does mean that when those circumstances arise, that it's more likely to be an urgent on-the-day response, and there are risks to some of the other kind of clinics that may normally happen. But a huge thank you to everyone that's managed to enable that, and to sharing that information with us so that we can share that with the public as well as you do through your normal mechanisms. Richard has mentioned the mental health programme of work within primary and community care, and that's an absolute priority for us at the moment, and has also mentioned the priority of the dementia diagnoses. I wanted also just to mention prescribing. So we had seen some recovery of the prescribing financial position in December. That was exceptionally challenging, and there are very good reasons for that that relate to COVID. There is a direct correlation between the months in which we have needed to spend more and the prevalence of COVID within our community. So we're all dedicated to simply making sure that our prescribing is safe and of a high quality and is cost effective for the remainder of this year, not long to go, and into next year, planning heavily for next year too. So I just want to mention as well, because there's been, if I may, Mark, there's been some references to the wider body of primary care, to pharmacy, dental and optoms, and to share with you that although that's not commissioning that will come to the integrated care board next year, it will the year after, and we are preparing for that in all sorts of ways, and we've been very pleased to welcome representatives from each of those sectors to our alliance meetings, the final in the trilogy of optometry. We welcomed colleagues last week, and that's really important preparation work for us in order that we can support each and every one of those services individually, but also kind of reach the potential of joining all of the primary medical care service, primary medical and other services up in our integrated neighbourhood teams and PCNs, and with the rest of our alliance partners. So just for assurance, that's work that's very actively going on at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks, Maddie. Any questions for Maddie on those things? I have to say, I suspect many of my colleagues are incredibly grateful for their part-time GP colleagues supporting them in practice with all the additional hours that they've been giving. And as you say, not just GP colleagues, but all members of the primary care team, I know, have been pulling out every stop. I've heard many examples of practices being supported by colleagues outside of their usual practice as well, to help them see them over a line of critical staffing levels. So thank you to everyone for what you've been doing in that regard. Have I missed anyone out? I think we're done. So thank you for that report. The governing body assurance framework. Graham, was there anything you wanted to raise with us on that?
Not really, Mark. Just all the key points are in paragraph 2, but there's one new risk that both Richard and Lisa have already mentioned, and that's the children and young people's access to mental health services. And there's been occasions where young people have had to be admitted into acute hospitals in the pediatric ward. So obviously it's a new risk, but people are aware of it, and there's new control measures in anyway. So other than that, I've got nothing else to add.
Yeah, and Lisa, I was just reflecting on our Senior Clinical Leaders Forum that we'd hosted the first one of those. It's over a month ago now, and do we need to regenerate it because it really did highlight that risk in a very personal way, didn't it? That made us focus on getting that summit around those young people to support their needs, which was I thought that worked really well. So make a plea for more of them. Great. Shall we go on to the minutes of the meetings? They're all there for endorsement. Anything that anyone wants to raise from those minutes? No, in which case we will do that endorsement. The next meeting will be the 24th of May, and thank you for bearing with us through the governing body. So it comes to time for questions from the public. Simon, do we have any additional questions other than those that we were made aware of prior to the meeting starting?
No additional questions, Mark, just the ones from Anthony Dooley.
Okay, so shall we go?
Hello, sorry, Simon, I just want to check you've got that last one that just came through a minute ago.
Here's one.
Yeah.
Not to hand, I haven't. Do you want to read it out?
I think no, that's all right. I'll send it to you because Jared sent it, but I'll send it.
Okay. Do you want to start then, Simon?
Okay, right. The first question is, do you agree with the quote attributed to Jeff Barton in the local press recently that testing is one of the few tools we, in brackets schools, still have to reduce transmission among students and staff, and the government must reverse its decision and continue to provide free tests to people working or studying in educational settings? Yes or no is his question.
I'm not sure whether it's a yes or no answer. But anyone want to say anything? I would certainly say that testing is a very helpful way of understanding the risk of spread. And lateral flow tests were brought in to help identify people who were asymptomatic and the risk that they potentially posed as a consequence. I suppose at the end of the day, it's a question about what we as a society have choose to do in terms of supporting the ability to do that in an equal way. And to date, that's been through the public availability of these tests. The tests will remain available, but at a cost. So it's I think a decision that's been made in terms of how we manage to live with COVID, but I suppose our experience is that since the reduction in restrictions, we've seen quite an uptick in the case rates. I don't know whether anyone would want to say anything additional. Okay, next question.
Next question is, the DFE response was, we are now moving to living with and managing the virus while maintaining the population's wall of protection and communicating safer behaviours that the public can follow to manage risk. Anthony Dooley saying this is absurd nonsense. Do you agree? Yes or no?
Again, not sure about yes or no, and whether it's to what has been said or to it being absurd nonsense. Anyone want to comment on that one? I think the decision has been made that we're supposed to be living with and managing the virus. I spoke at the start of the meeting around the importance of maintaining what we can do personally in terms of our responsibilities to do that. We've had the vaccination program to try and protect those who are most vulnerable. We've got a vaccination program for children and young people that we know is being taken up, but not necessarily at very high levels. I don't know what else we can do in terms of supporting that differently. Lorna?
It's just a comment. We obviously need more data and research figures about how serious the new variants are compared to the original variants, and this is sort of ongoing work the whole time. But as a comment, I would just like to say that the intensive care units currently are not overwhelmed. So it's almost back to the pre-COVID level on the intensive care units in terms of the cross-section of cases which are there. So that part of it is encouraging, but we definitely will have to have ongoing analysis of the case mix and where the variants are, just to see how that all develops. And I think this is a journey that we're on for certainly the next 2 or 3 years, probably.
Yeah, undoubtedly. Thank you, Lorna. Shall we move on?
Okay, the third question is, what impact on the tackling health inequalities agenda for the poorest do you anticipate, given what is labelled the cost of living crisis?
I think I addressed some of those things in the preamble to our meeting. Did anyone want to offer anything additional? Talked about fuel poverty and potentially food poverty, and having to make decisions between eating and heating, and who in the household gets to eat. I don't think we can be any more stark than that. Okay, shall we go on to the next one?
Okay, question 4. In the current financial year, how many contracts for health services were given to private providers, and what was the cost of those contracts? How do those numbers compare with the past financial years?
Mark, I think I responded to that question earlier.
Okay. We might need to look at numbers specifically if it's possible. But we'll do that, shall we, in the...
I'm happy to do summaries myself.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And the final question, or the fifth question?
The fifth question, yeah, there's one additional late question which has come in, so I'll come to that in just a second. But the fifth question is, I applaud your decision not to hold this meeting in public, especially given the removal of legal public health protections and the inevitable huge rise in infections subsequently. But how is the public meant to understand that GP surgeries rightly insist on patients wearing face masks, but it is optional on public transport and in indoor spaces such as shops?
And I think I gave an answer to that again in my preamble. I think it is about how we as a civil society respect people who may be vulnerable in settings that they may be more likely to be there, and about respecting requests to wear masks, not for your own necessarily your own protection, but for the protection of others. And if we believe we are a society, then we would surely respect and be kind to those who might not be able to, who have vulnerability that may not be as evident I would really hope that people would respect that, and not be unnecessarily challenging. And do we have a sixth question?
We do. So the sixth one from Anthony Dooley, he says, so he asks, maybe I am jumping the gun, but the IPR refers to patient safety. Given the financial statement re-workforce, in brackets, no additional money, what issues concern you, for instance, maternity?
Lisa?
What issues concern me around maternity? Well, actually, we have seen, Anthony, an improvement in some of our maternity safety outcomes for women and babies. But we still have concerns as a system maternity board around the number of pregnant people that are experiencing postpartum hemorrhage. We're still an outlier within our system as compared to other systems within the East of England. So that worries us. The work that we're doing around that is to improve our triaging process. So when we've looked at a number of incidents that have related to poor outcomes for pregnant people and their babies, a number of them point to a need for an improved triage process. So we have a big QI program that's looking at triage. I think as a board, the other areas that we would be worried about is around making sure that we have equality of access and support for our communities that we were talking about earlier, our Black and minority ethnic communities. We know that some outcomes for those communities are not as good as for other communities. We are concerned about our smoking at time of delivery for pregnant people in North East Essex. So lots and lots of worries, but what we have seen since the strengthened leadership at ESNEFT, in particularly in maternity services, so there's a new clinical director, there's a new director of midwifery and maternity matrons. What we have seen is improved outcomes, and Anthony, you'll know well that the continuity of carer model is the model. It's not the answer to everything, but it is the model that we know will support some of the reductions in poorer outcomes. So we know ESNEFT are seeking to have 100% continuity of carer by this time next year, so that will improve outcomes and will improve the care given to pregnant people and their families in some of our more deprived communities. So it should help to improve the health inequalities that we see in outcomes for babies. But thank you for your question.
I think I would want to add that, and just being more generalist, is that I think it's disappointing that we don't have the financial support to do this, and are having to choose. You know, maybe we understand why that financial support is not so forthcoming, but choosing between increasing our workforce capacity over service delivery, is that a choice? I don't know that it is. I think numbers are important, but I think it's also about what are we doing so that our workforce teams are better able to work together in an integrated way for people, and looking at the challenges we're going to face demographically over the next 10 years with a hugely increasing older population, and the impact of deprivation on what are comorbidities. So how many long-term conditions do you have? Because what we do is treat people as holistically as we can if we're going to make an impact. If we just treat people as an organ or a pathway of specific clinical care, we will not be able to make the most of the capacity that we do have. So I think it's as much about how we use our information and intelligence, about how we use transformation and training and development for our workforce to be able to do the job that they trained to do, and do that well, I think is going to be equally as important. But unless the capacity is there, we will again just be burning people out and not retaining them for the length of their service that they could provide, particularly at the end of careers where the experience of those people is really, really important to retain. So I think there's a combination of things in that question about workforce that need addressing, and we're certainly not seeing, for example, Health Education England is focused on NHS workers. It isn't supporting in the way that it might non-NHS workers. So, you know, what more do we need to do collectively as a health and care grouping, an integrated care system, not just different elements of an integrated care system. Lots more to do. Anything else that anyone wants to add? In which case, we've come to the end of our part 1 agenda. So thank you for those tuned in, and thank you for the questions. And look forward to seeing you on the 25th of May. If we can, everyone else move into our part 2, that would be great. So